Hello and welcome to the High Tech Learning Center. This is the Web Development Prep course, and this lesson is an introduction to full stack web development from a high view. The only prerequisite for this video is that you have to know what HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are. If you understand what those three things are, then you're free to move on with this video. The learning objectives for this video is that by the end of watching this video and completing this lesson, you should be able to describe what full stack web development means. And you should also be able to explain the difference between the front end, the back end, and data storage. So let's just start with an analogy. Let's say you go to a restaurant. When you go to a restaurant, you first walk in and then you are in the dining room. There's a kitchen, and then there's also a fridge where there's storage of food and meals, and there's also maybe a freezer. So you have dining room, kitchen, and freezer. When you're in the dining room, you make a request for food. The request goes to the kitchen. The kitchen processes the request and gives you a response. If you ask for a meal that's not available, like say that's something that's out of season or that's not available in your local region, you may get a response that says, "I'm sorry, that's a bad request." But if you make a request for something that's on the menu and that is also available, then you will get a response that, yes, that is available. And after you've made that request, then you make another request. Okay, that's available. I would like to have it. So you make another request to the kitchen. Okay, I would actually like to order this food. And then you get a response of the food that comes back. Some requests require that the chef goes to a fridge to actually get the storage. So, some things you request from the kitchen, they might already have it ready in the kitchen. There's soup. Soup is already ready. You make a request, you get a response. But other requests, you may request something like a frozen meal, like maybe you ordered chicken, but maybe the chicken is in the refrigerator. You don't just leave chicken out. So you make a request, they say, yes, we can make jerk chicken. They go to the fridge, they get the chicken, they come back to the kitchen, they cut it up, and then they respond. And then you get your meal in the dining room. So this is a request response cycle. And that's what happens every time you go to a restaurant, you have this cycle. So that same thing is modeled in full stack web development. So there are three primary areas that we're talking about here that relate to full stack web development. The dining room is like the front end. The front end is what the user sees and directly manipulates. When you go to a web page, you actually see the front end. So you see, you see what's the visual things. You see CSS, you see an HTML page, all of that. You're directly manipulating here. So here, you're actually pressing buttons. Like when you have a menu, you're pressing a button. I want this type of food. I want ugali. I want spaghetti. I want whatever you see on the front end, right? You're pressing buttons to manipulate. Now, when you're pressing those buttons, those are going to go back to a kitchen, which is the back end. So the back end says, okay, you press the button here, and then I need to then process the response for whatever request that you made. So the kitchen is like the back end. This is where the data is routed, processed, stored, and prepared. So the back end includes the kitchen and the refrigerator, whereas the front end is just the dining room. And how that relates in terms of web development is actual technologies. So the HTML lives on the front end. CSS lives on the front end. Also on the front end can be your JavaScript frameworks, Angular, React. The front end might even be a mobile application. It might be your Android phone. Your Android phone will have a mobile application that's working in your Android system, or iOS if it's iPhone. That's the front end. That's what you see and you interact with. Also, JavaScript is very, very, very commonly used on the front end, on mobile devices and also on websites. So those are all front end technologies. But when you make that request to the kitchen or the back end, there usually is something that's called a web application server. And many times you're interacting with what we call microservices. So there might be several different small back-end applications that are all working together to bring you what you need. These back-end applications can be built with many things. With microservices, sometimes you might have one service that's built in Rails, another one that's built in PHP, another one that's built in Node, etc. Sometimes you might be operating with a very large infrastructure like Microsoft.NET, backend that's handling all of that stuff. So the backend, you have these different servers that are running that are handling requests. Many times those servers have to interact with the database. So we have one example of a database, Postgres. There are many. SQL is very, very common. Structured query language has been around since 1970. It's a very common type of database, but there are many others. You have Oracle databases, a whole bunch of different databases. You also have NoSQL databases, things like Redis, where they have key value stores that store your data. But the bottom line about databases and storage is that this is where data is stored and it is interacted directly with by the back end. So when you make a request, you usually don't typically go directly to the storage. You interact with a web application server or microservices that then talk to databases, get the data, process it, and then deliver it to the front end. The same way when you order the food, the kitchen processes the request. Sometimes they need a refrigerator, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they need a freezer, sometimes they don't. But this is what the request response cycle looks like from a broad view. And this is what it means to be a full stack web developer, is that you're interacting with all of these things. So in this course, in the web development course, we'll be teaching backend technologies like PHP, but we'll also be teaching HTML, CSS, and eventually other JavaScript frameworks and other front-end tools as well. What we're going to be doing in this course, in this particular course, is we're going to be talking specifically just about the front end, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But we're going to be making requests by the end of the course to a very simple API that returns some simple data to us, and then we're going to take that data and then process it on the front end as well. So hopefully now you have enough information to understand what is the front end, what is the back end. The back end consists here of two layers now. It's web application servers or microservices, and then also databases. And these are all the technologies listed on this page. These are examples of front end and back end technologies. There are many more than what's just listed here, but this is just a way to get you started in understanding. So in our course, this particular intro course, in the preparation course, we're focusing specifically on the front end. So you should be able to answer these questions now in Moodle. What does full stack mean in the context of web development? What are some of the common technologies found on the front end? And then what are some of the common frameworks and languages used in the back end? So in summary, the full stack is everything: front end, back end, and the databases. So hopefully from this analogy, you've been able to see a little bit about what this means as full stack, a web developer in training, and you should be able to answer these final questions here. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.